They expected rust and bones. But when they opened the cockpit 70 years later, the pilot was still there, his hand gripping a leather journal with one word written on the cover: home. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly, waves glittering like molten glass under the rising sun. From high above, in the belly of a military transport helicopter, the island appeared as nothing more than a green dot, swallowed by jungle, nameless on modern maps. The mission was simple, at least on paper. "Recon only," Staff Sergeant Mark Ellison had said for the fourth time, his gravel voice steady over the headset. "We locate, we photograph, we leave. No recoveries without clearance." But even Ellison didn't believe the words as he spoke them, because everyone on that helicopter knew this wasn't a normal recon. Dr. Lena Morris, the historian, clutched a folder of photocopied charts from World War II. Her white shirt was already damp from the humidity, but her eyes were sharp, darting between the canopy below and the papers in her lap. "This is where he vanished," she whispered, more to herself than to the others. Across from her sat Corporal Hayes, the youngest. He was barely 22, his helmet slightly too big for his head, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "So what are we looking for? A ghost plane? Some rusted wings and a skull with a helmet?" No one laughed. Sergeant Torres, broad-shouldered, silent, turned his gaze slowly toward Hayes. His stare was enough to silence the jokes. Next to him sat Miller, older, steady, the kind of man who didn't need to speak to be listened to. The helicopter dipped lower. The jungle canopy rushed up like a green wall. For a moment, Ellison thought he saw something glinting between the trees. Metal, maybe. Or maybe just sunlight on wet leaves. But he said nothing. Because sometimes when the forest wants to keep a secret, it plays tricks on your eyes. The first steps. The landing skids touched down on a narrow strip of sand. The helicopter's rotors kicked up salt spray and grit, coating everything in a fine layer of dust before the blades slowed to silence. The jungle loomed beyond the beach, a wall of green, dense and impenetrable, the kind of place that seemed to breathe. "Form up," Ellison ordered. They moved single file into the trees. The path wasn't a path at all, just tangled vines and roots. Machetes sliced through the overgrowth. Insects buzzed, their drone constant, a living static. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became, thick with heat, thick with anticipation. After 30 minutes, Hayes muttered, "This place doesn't want us here." Torres shot him a look. Places don't want, people want. Remember that. But Hayes wasn't wrong. Every step felt like an intrusion. Every bird call seemed to stop just before they arrived, as if the jungle itself was holding its breath. An hour passed before Torres raised his fist. The team froze. "Contact," he said quietly. 12 o'clock. They converged on the spot. Half buried in mud was a twisted sheet of metal, rusted, corroded, but stamped with a star. A faded white star, the kind painted on aircraft wings in the final year of World War II. Dr. Morris crouched low, brushing moss away with trembling fingers. This is 1944 paint formula. This isn't a supply drop crate. This is fuselage." The words hit harder than expected, because fuselage meant only one thing: the plane. They pressed forward. Every 20 yards, more signs appeared. A broken propeller propped against a banyan tree like a forgotten monument. Corroded, .50 caliber shell casings scattered like offerings in the dirt. A torn sleeve of a flight jacket tangled in the roots, the patch still barely visible. Jensen muttered, "Feels like we're walking into a graveyard." No one answered, because in their hearts, they knew that's exactly what it was. The jungle opened without warning, and there it was. The P-47 Thunderbolt lay nose first in the earth, its frame broken but intact, wings sagging beneath decades of vines. Moss clung to the metal like a burial shroud, but the canopy was still whole. Ellison froze. His voice was low but steady. "Positions, Perimeter. The team circled, rifles raised, but the only thing waiting was silence. Dr. Morris stepped closer, her camera trembling in her hands. This has to be Harper's plane. The name hung in the air. Captain William Harper, a man who had vanished on June 12th, 1945. Patrol routine, no distress call, no wreckage ever found, until now. Through the grime-streaked canopy glass, shadows shifted. At first, Ellison thought it was just vines, just tricks of the light. But then his eyes adjusted. Someone was inside. He stepped closer, boots sinking into damp earth, his breath caught. A man sat in the pilot's seat, helmet cracked but whole, goggles still strapped across his face, his body unnaturally preserved, as though the jungle itself had chosen not to touch him. Hayes stumbled back, whispering, That's impossible. 70 years, he should be—" Torres finished quietly. Gone. But he wasn't, and in his right hand, gripped so tightly the knuckles looked carved from stone, was a small leather journal. Dr. Morris's breath caught. He's still holding it. Ellison leaned closer, eyes narrowing. On the cover in faded gold letters, one word, home. The team stood in silence. The jungle seemed to press in around them, listening. Finally, Ellison spoke. Open it. The latch groaned but gave way. With a sharp crack, the canopy lifted. A stale breath of air escaped, thick with a metallic tang, as if time itself had been sealed inside. Dr. Morris reached in, her hands trembling. She touched the journal, stiff, cracked, heavier than it should have been, and pulled it free. The weight shocked her. It felt dense, as though every word inside carried the burden of 7 decades. She opened to the first page. June 12th, 1945. Patrol routine, smoke over the island, command says nothing, but I know better. Something's here. Her voice was barely above a whisper. He knew this place wasn't empty. Before anyone could respond, crack! A gunshot split the air. Bark exploded inches from Torres's head. Contact! Ellison shouted. Positions! Now! The team scattered into cover. Morris clutched the journal to her chest, her knuckles white. Hayes's hands shook on his rifle. Through the vines, shapes emerged. 3 men, their uniforms ragged, relics of another century. Old rifles raised, eyes hard, faces weathered, but unmistakably alive. One shouted in broken English, "Leave it! Leave the plane!" The jungle went silent again. Only the journal in Morris's hands seemed to breathe. The first shot hadn't been aimed to kill. It tore into the air, splitting the silence into 2 halves, before and after. Birds scattered violently, their wings slicing against leaves that had slept undisturbed for decades. The team dropped to cover instinctively. Ellison's fist pumped a command. Miller hit the dirt. Hayes froze, lips whispering curses. Torres crouched low, rifle ready but uncertain. And Dr. Lena Morris, clutching the journal to her chest, just stared into the trees. 3 figures stepped out of the shadows. Their uniforms were not costumes. They were not relics. They were real. Frayed, sun-bleached, patched beyond recognition, but still bearing the faint insignia of the Imperial Japanese Army. They looked like men who had marched out of a black-and-white photograph and into the present. One raised his rifle higher. His eyes were hard. His English was broken, but the meaning was sharp. Leave. The plane. For a long moment, no one breathed. Hayes whispered, That's impossible. But Ellison wasn't sure anymore. Because in war, impossibility is just another word for, we haven't seen it yet. The leader of the 3 soldiers stepped forward. He was gaunt but strong, his jaw tight, his hands steady. His eyes held no madness, only discipline. The kind of discipline that doesn't fade with decades. His men flanked him, rifles leveled, knuckles white. Their weapons were old but cared for, the wood polished, the barrels oiled. These weren't props. These weren't museum pieces. They were tools that had never been put down. Ellison realized the truth. These men hadn't surrendered. Not in 1945, not in the 50s, not ever. The war had ended, but not for them. Dr. Morris's pulse hammered as she held the leather-bound journal. If she handed it over, the world might never know what Harper had written. If she kept it, these men might not let her leave alive. Ellison's voice cut across the tension. "Stand down. We're not here to fight." The leader shook his head slowly. His rifle didn't move. "You take nothing. Leave now." Miller whispered, "Look at them." "They believe they're still on duty," Torres murmured. 70 years later. But no one said what they were all thinking. If they'd survived this long, what else had they seen in this jungle? Morris swallowed hard, and then, against all reason, she opened the journal. Her voice trembled, but she forced the words out. "Day 3. Smoke above the trees. I hear voices. Japanese. They don't know I'm here. Or maybe they do." The soldiers stiffened. Morris turned another page. Day 6. Left food near the tree line. In the morning it was gone. They left water in return. We never spoke. But we understood. 2 enemies stranded together, waiting for a war that had already ended. The leader's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to the journal, then back to Morris. For the first time, his rifle dipped an inch lower. The team realized it together. This wasn't just Harper's journal. It was theirs too. Their survival, their silence, their endless watch. It was all in those pages. Torres muttered, "They've been here all this time, protecting him, protecting his story." But Hayes shook his head, whispering, "Or protecting their own. Because once the world knows, they'll have to face the truth, that they fought a war that ended without them." The jungle wind shifted. Leaves swirled around the fuselage. The smell of damp metal and rot filled the clearing. Morris turned another page. Day 7. Tried to reach out. Raised my hands. They fired a warning, same as before. I think they're as lost as I am. She swallowed. The ink smeared at the bottom of the page, as if written with a trembling hand. "If I don't make it back, tell them I wasn't alone. Tell them even here, enemies became shadows beside me. We all wanted the same thing, not victory, just home." The word echoed, the same etched into the cover. Home. No one moved. Then, slowly, the leader stepped forward. He placed his weathered hand on the journal. His fingers lingered. His eyes burned with something unspoken. And then, in one motion, he pushed it back into Morris's hands. The other 2 soldiers lowered their rifles completely. The leader lifted his rifle, not at them, but at the sky. He fired once. The shot echoed across the canopy like thunder. Birds exploded upward, wheeling into the blue. But it wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was a salute. The soldiers stepped back, into shadow, into silence, and then they were gone. The jungle swallowed them whole. Hayes whispered, We just saw ghosts." But Ellison shook his head. Number not ghosts, men who never stopped fighting. Dr. Morris pressed the journal to her chest. Her knuckles were white, her eyes wet. Ellison's voice softened. "We're done here. Let's move." The helicopter's rotors thundered against the sky. The island shrank, swallowed by endless Pacific blue. No one spoke. Not Hayes, not Miller, not Torres, and not Morris, who sat with the journal on her lap, tracing the word on its cover again and again. Home. Finally, she whispered, "He never made it back. But maybe we just did it for him." Ellison's jaw tightened. For him and for them. Some stories aren't about victory or defeat. They're about the men trapped between. A pilot who died clutching a single word. Soldiers who guarded his silence for 70 years. An island that refused to let go. And in the end, the only thing they all wanted, the only thing that mattered, was one word: home.